My name is Warren Seska. I'm the head of performance optimization at Vungle. If you don't know Vungle, you've probably seen our banners around. We've replaced salespeople with them this year. They're lower T&E. But if you don't know us, we're an in-app video platform primarily designed to deliver high-value users through engaging or enriched video ads. So what am I going to talk about today? So the title is The Secret to Gain Profitability, How to Identify, Retain, and Engage the Highest Value Users. So I think the marketing team might have oversold this one a little bit. How to identify, I think it would be a little naive of me to come up here and talk you through how to measure your LTV curves as a buyer or even apply that to a strategy. I think the market's probably been at that stage for a couple of years now, and especially after Oliver's talk, I think everyone's going to be doing that extremely well. Equally so, I think it would be a stretch for me to talk about how to engage or retain users once they're in your game. Frankly, that's not my speciality. So I won't be talking about any of this, really. What I can talk to you about is really what we're seeing from a platform standpoint, how you can access those high-value users or some strategies that our buyers are using, some interesting strategies, when really the competition for those real high-value users is fiercer than ever. So, specifically what I'm going to be talking about is first a couple of creative buying methods. Now, we employ sort of 10 to 20 different buying methods that we advise to UA buyers or developers at Vungle, but these are two that I personally find quite interesting and give you an idea of how creative our buyers are getting. The next thing is attribution consideration. So it might seem out of place, but specifically I want to talk about view-through attribution and how that can affect the overall LTV of your campaigns. And third is fraud prevention and detection. So I want to touch on fraud briefly. It's quite a hot topic right now. I want to talk about some of the good things we're seeing and some of the more challenging things. So, this is the old deck. OK. So let's first start with first mover advantage. It's a pretty catchy title. I get used to those. So I think the motivation for this buying model is really described by the curve here. So what I've done is plotted the average platform conversion rate, the red line, as well as the average 7-day return on ad spend as a function of the daily view number. So the daily view number is the number of views a user has seen within one publisher each day. So this curve basically tells us that the fewer videos a user has seen, the more likely they are to convert into an install, but also the more likely they are to provide you high value once in your game or app. And if you're wondering, it's not kind of a cause and effect thing because of the kind of platform dynamics. It's actually true also on a specific advertiser and publisher level. So what does this mean for a buyer? It essentially means if you're number one buyer, if you're generating the highest eCPM through your CPI and conversion rate, then you're getting a lot of first views. And in doing so, you have this kind of cyclical effect where you also get the highest conversion rate because you're getting those first views. And also, it's likely that you have a stronger bidding power in that you are getting a higher return on ad spend, and therefore, you can pay a higher CPI. So what does that mean for people who are getting a lot of second-place views? It means actually it's harder to move into the first spot than it is to sustain the first spot. Because to move from second to first, you have to take on some risk. You might actually have to bid outside of your normal kind of LTV curve in order to take on that risk, win the first view, and then adopt the benefit of that first view. So how are our buyers kind of managing this? Those people who are in second view a lot of time, or third and fourth even. So one strategy that quite a few of our buyers have adopted is what we call the first mover advantage. And that's really predominantly for new supply. So when we have a new supply that comes onto the platform, it's really an unknown. So we have a little bit of time where we're still figuring out who to assign impressions to for the benefit of that publisher. So what some buyers are doing is creating a kind of high-tier campaign, a high CPI campaign that's always on, and we just feed in new publisher, new supply to it. And therefore, they get a slight advantage in the first couple of days, and they can secure that first view spot. At which point, they can really evaluate the full potential of that supply. If they're in second spot, they'd be evaluating a lower return on ad spend, and therefore they might choose to disregard it. But if they're in the first spot, they're kind of evaluating the maximum that supply source can offer. And then they have the opportunity to kind of disregard it if they don't like it and keep it if they do. This obviously comes with a risk that you are going to pay too high for some new publishers that actually aren't giving you kind of high quality. So that's the risk that you get, but it's also something that we've seen beneficial for a number of our advertisers to take advantage of this situation. Okay, so the next one I want to talk you through is actually, I changed this deck, but it's not the same. So I'll try and talk you through it anyway. So the next one is what we call a genre-based or a first-view CPM buyout. I might just leave it on this slide because this doesn't really help. It's a first-view CPM buyout. So a while back, we had some advertisers who, big advertisers, who really wanted the first view. But they didn't just want first view in some publishers, they wanted first view everywhere. And this kind of was in line with some seasonality. So for example, at Christmas, it's quite an attractive proposition from a brand perspective to say, the first view that every single user sees from Bungle should be my game. So it's fairly expensive, but fairly a big branding play. Now the challenge is that makes sense, I think, and it can be quite powerful for some of our biggest advertisers. But for a mid-tier advertiser, it can be really expensive and might not back out in terms of the LTV of those users. So it's actually been changed slightly over time. And the way it's been changed is that some of our advertisers will use a CPM model. And it seems strange to take on a CPM model when you've actually been paying on CPI. You're essentially taking on risk that previously the platform has had. But the benefit of taking on the CPI model is that you can pitch exactly for that first view. So you can pitch a very high CPM for that first view. You don't take on any uncertainty through conversion rate. So you can basically ensure that you're winning first view from every publisher that you want. So some of our mid-tier buyers will pay on a CPM basis for very specific publishers that they know back out for them. They'll add an ad back off, so that means they're only paying for one, or only showing one video per user per day, meaning that they're guaranteeing themselves the first view and no other view for the day. And because that's a very high return on ad spend relative to other views, and because potentially who we see this works for is where there's a strong demographic, for example, slots or something like that, they can actually make this back out. So they're selecting to only bid on the first view and on a CPM basis, but can still make it back out in terms of a return on ad spend. Okay, so next thing I want to go on to is attribution. So specifically view through attribution, and it's obviously quite a hot topic in terms of video. And most of the conversations that I have about view through attribution come in the form of, do you or do you not think that a view is enough of an engagement to warrant an install being attributed to it? And it's an interesting topic, and I think it has a lot of value, and I'm happy to discuss with any of you whether that's true or not. But today I want to show you how you can view it in a slightly different way. So just to run through, for those that don't know what view through attribution is, path one is normal click attribution, where a user will see a video, they'll click on that video, they'll get redirected to the App Store, they'll hopefully install the app, and then the last platform that has shown that click will get attributed the consequent install by the attribution provider. It's normal click-through attribution. The window between click or install has to be within 7 days. And obviously the last click wins, so you have to be the most recent click. Now, view-through attribution is something that an advertiser can use if they want to. And it's the second path. So a user will see a view, see a video. They won't click. They'll continue playing their game or whatever they're doing. And then within 24 hours, they'll navigate back to the App Store, download the game that they saw in the view. And then if the advertiser has selected it, that view can cause the attribution. So as long as it was the most recent view and there were no clicks that happened at all, then the view is actually the point of attribution. So what does this mean? It essentially means that as an advertiser, essentially you're looking at your pool of organics. And really the way that your reporting will show it is that you've transferred organics to view-through installs. Now, those organics, depending on your view of how powerful a video view is, and Bungles are very powerful, it really depends on whether you think it's a sensible thing to do or not. But the effect when you're buying from Bungle is the following. So here's a plot sort of day along the bottom. The green bars are click-through installs. The yellow line is the number of views that you're being allocated by Vungle. And the blue line, or the blue bar, is the number of view-through installs that you're getting. So you can see on day 7, essentially what you're doing by turning on view-through attribution, you're increasing your conversion rate. For the same number of views, you are getting, or you're counting more installs. Now, by increasing your conversion rate, it actually means that your eCPM goes up within Vungle, so you get allocated more views. So by getting allocated more views, not only do you just count those view-through installs, but you actually get more click installs from those views. So it's important when considering whether to turn on view-through or not, it's important to consider the return on ad spend that you'll get from those extra click installs, but then also, because you've increased your overall conversion rate, your overall eCPM, you'll get more first views. So actually, your overall return on ad spend will go up across the board as well. So really, the consideration outside of whether you think a view is powerful enough is, does the extra that you're paying for what was organics equal those two benefits? OK. So what's fraud got to do with it? So I wanted to touch on this briefly because it's becoming more and more important topic for us. So I think we've seen some really, really good benefits, basically, over the last year, really big improvements on the fraud landscape. A lot of attribution providers have started releasing fraud analytics and actually fraud prevention. One thing that I wanted to stress, I think Gabe Layden, the CEO of Machine Zone last year, made a really good point about kind of buyers driving the industry and buyers driving improvement in the industry. And I think that definitely is true of fraud. And we've seen some solid improvements in that for those attribution providers that are providing fraud analytics, buyers are really looking into their analytics deeply and highlighting if there's fraud or not, and really not refusing to pay for it, which is fantastic. The challenge is the difference between detection and prevention. So what we see is that that's very stark difference between some buyers and others. So some buyers will detect fraud and refuse to pay for it. And they should be refusing to pay for it. But that creates a challenge in the chain in that in most cases, a platform will already be paying out to publishers. And then once an advertiser raises fraud, it's a very difficult process to recoup that money. And essentially, it is a possible process, but it's a very slow process. And it can mean that there's slight inefficiencies, which mean that fraudulent publishers still get paid out. So a much better model is when attribution providers don't send install postbacks that are fraudulent. So not only do they report that something is, an install is fraudulent, but they refuse to send a postback to the platform. And that prevents any publishers ever getting paid out, which really kind of kills fraud at the source. So I'd encourage you all as buyers to consider, am I detecting fraud and reporting it after the fact, or am I preventing it in the first instance? The next thing I want to talk about is something that we've seen a lot of, unfortunately. And it's a very kind of overlooked situation, and it's something that, unfortunately, is happening a lot in the industry. So this is kind of a typical UA buyer's view if they're using a certain attribution provider. And they'll see a number of different providers that they're buying with. Now, one thing I want to stress is the importance of receiving impression data. Because the risk, if you're not, is that you could be being sent impressions as clicks. So on this red bar here, this is a platform that is sending impressions as clicks. You can see impressions and click numbers here are pretty apparent, pretty equal, and the installs are relatively similar too. So this is a bad situation. The reason being that if a platform sends impressions as clicks, they're essentially using view-through attribution, but with the wrong click window. They're applying a 7-day click window to what essentially are view installs. So they're actually making you pay for your organics. And also, it means you're paying the wrong source. So the fact, because attribution works on last click, and all of these views are being logged as clicks, it's a very common situation where this platform in red is going to be sending clicks when it's not a click, and also claiming installs, click installs, when actually a click hasn't even happened. So it means you're attributing spend to a platform that potentially isn't delivering the installs that you're counting, and therefore you're attributing spend to a platform where maybe the return on ad spend isn't actually coming from. So unfortunately, this is rife, and I would encourage you all to take a look at your numbers and consider whether this is happening. That's it from me. I think, in summary, get creative with your buying models. Consider the impact of view-through attribution. And thirdly, I think raise the expectation of fraud. As buyers, it's completely up to you how much fraud is in the industry, and there's a lot of power for you to all stop it, essentially. Any questions?